Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, we will start. You are invited to come up to the front if you want. There are still some seats available in the first row. I'm very happy to welcome you to this breakout session number 2 called Recovery, Recycling and Reclamation. My name is Ellen Michel. I'm happy to facilitate this session. I'm working for GIZ Pro Klima, and I'm also heading the Secretariat of the Climate and Ozone Protection Alliance that is focusing on sustainable management of ODS and HFC banks. So this day and topic is very close to my heart. And I would like to start this session with 2 quotes I would like to share with you. Which I think suit today's day and topic, looking into recycling in the broader scope. So the first one is from Annie Leonard, who's a proponent of sustainability, who says there is no such thing as away. When we throw anything away, it must go somewhere. So there is something we have to deal with at the end of life of whatever it is. And the second quote is from Pete Seeger, who is a folk singer and a social activist. And he states, if it can't be reduced, reused, repaired, rebuilt, refurbished, refinished, resold, recycled, or composted, then it should be restricted, designed, or removed from production. And I think this actually suits to the Montreal Protocol, to the Kigali Amendment. Obviously, we are dealing with substances here that cannot be composted. So it's very wise to think through, shall it be further produced? And if it is, how do we properly recycle it? So with that, I would actually just like to reiterate that obviously if we're talking about further treatment of refrigerant, recovery is the first step for reusing refrigerants, followed then either by recycling or reclamation, depending on refrigerant properties, equipment requirements, and supporting infrastructure. And in this session, we will hopefully touch upon topics such as availability of recovery cylinders, of technologies, quality control requirements, advanced recovery technologies, and also about the importance of reverse supply chains. We will look into challenges, including technical, economical, and logistical barriers, and hopefully also listen to some good already existing and practiced policies and programs. And with that, I would like to hand over to our opening speaker, Mrs. Elvira Nigido, who has been a member of the task force of the TIAP for life cycle refrigerant management. Besides that, she is also working for AGAS as a group sustainability manager and has almost 3 decades of experience in life cycle management of ODS. She has also been a member of various UNEP-TIAP task forces, and she holds degrees in environmental sciences, environmental management, and business management. She will set the scene, and then we warmly invite you to a very interactive session with lots of questions, contributions. We know there are lots of experts also in the room who have their experiences, so we would like to exchange on that. Elvira, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ellen. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. As Ellen mentioned, what I'll touch on this afternoon is on the 3 key aspects of recovery, recycling and reclamation. A lot of the information that I'll present today has come from the LRM Task Force report, and so it's a great opportunity to then cover a couple of the pertinent items, but then open up the floor to further conversation and discussion. Actually, before I continue, I'll also take the opportunity to introduce Laurent. He's on the panel. He was also on the task force and will be a subject matter expert to add to the conversation. So just very quickly, this afternoon, touching on the definitions around recovery, recycling, and reclamation. One thing that's apparent is that different people have different understanding of what those terms are. So we'll touch on those definitions. Then on the importance of refrigerant recovery, effective refrigerant recovery for recycling and reclamation, taking a look at some of the obstacles and challenges, some of the policies that are out there, and then a couple of points to summarise and conclude. So according to the Montreal Protocol Handbook, the definition for recovery talks about how the collection and storage of controlled substances occur from machinery, equipment, containment vessels, during servicing or prior to disposal. Recycling, on the other hand, looks at how we can reuse that recovered refrigerant or controlled substance following a basic cleaning process, such as filtering and drying. For refrigerants, recycling normally involves recharging back into the equipment that it came from, and it often occurs on site. Recycling is also predominantly focusing on single component refrigerants. Reclamation means the reprocessing and upgrading of recovered controlled substances through mechanisms such as filtering, drying, distillation, and chemical treatment to restore the substance back to a specified standard of performance. It often occurs off-site processing at a facility dedicated for reclaim. The largest opportunity to recover refrigerant comes at equipment end of life. So we can't underestimate the importance of refrigerant recovery. Like Alan mentioned, it's the first step. So before any recycling or reclamation or even destruction can occur, we need to be able to extract the product from that system or from that containment vessel. Unfortunately, recovery generally remains low in many A5 and non-A5 parties. And then once refrigerant is recovered, it can be reused by either recycling the product or reclaiming the product. Recovery for recycling and reclamation actually supports the circular economy by reducing the need to produce new refrigerants, which then presents a significant opportunity to minimise emissions and their potential impacts on the environment. It also buys us a bit of time as we transition to lower global warming alternatives as well. Reusing refrigerant doesn't count towards Montreal Protocol consumption targets, and reuse can be used as a tool towards compliance. Effective refrigerant recovery for the purposes of recycling and reclamation for reuse requires a significant change in behaviour at scale to stop these gases from being vented. How do we do that? Well, we need comprehensive and continued technician training, so that whole education and awareness, access to refrigerant recovery machines and equipment, establishing a reverse supply chain, and we've heard that term quite a bit so far earlier this morning, and again, we can't underestimate the importance of that. So by having that reverse supply chain, we're enabling access to cylinders, cylinder data tracking, recovery equipment, collection networks, storage facilities, so that the refrigerants can then be returned for recycling and reclamation or destruction. Technicians play a huge role in enabling recovery to occur, so they need sufficient time to complete the recoveries. Once the product goes through recycling or reclamation, access to chemical analysis so that we know that the actual end result results in a product with good quality outcomes, so it's suitable for reuse. Effective recovery also is contingent on financial mechanisms to support it and incentivise it. And then policy frameworks, regulatory or voluntary, play a huge part in effective recovery as well. Some of the challenges that we face relate to economic and technical aspects. So just briefly touching on a few economic obstacles. You know, unfortunately in some countries, phase outs and phase downs can create complex market dynamics. Oversupply leading up to a phase down can create stockpiling. And also we have situations where there are a significant number of excess allowances relative to demand, creating a lot of headroom. This results in weaker incentives to find leaks and recover refrigerant for reuse and reclamation. The costs of undertaking those types of activities is higher than the cost of purchasing new refrigerants. Stringent phase-down schedules may initially increase refrigerant pricing, and so the market then responds by increasing recovery efforts or starting to shift to alternative lower GWP products. In some cases, we've seen illegal trade of product as well, which doesn't help the overall cause. Fluctuating refrigerant prices may make it difficult to justify capital investment in recycling and reclamation and recovery networks and reverse supply chain infrastructure. From a technical perspective, you know, in this morning's session also highlighted, there are technologies available to do recovery, recycling, reclamation. However, accessibility, in particular in A5 and low volume countries, continues to be a problem due to the size of their respective economies, the market conditions, the geography, essentially the local situation. And then on the other hand, when technologies are broadly available and accessible, we've found that technical improvements may still need to be made to those processes because those technologies aren't as efficient and cost effective. A couple of technical barriers that we know about, for example, disposable cylinders, or other words, non-refillable cylinders. These are widely used. How do we recover the trapped gas or the heel that remains in those cylinders after all the liquid contents have been removed? Those trapped gases eventually find their way to the atmosphere. We have technical barriers regarding the suitability of certain equipment. Some recovery, recycling and reclamation equipment is unable to recover impurities. There's an inadequate supply of empty recovery cylinders to contain the product after it's been recovered. And then when product is recovered, sometimes we have situations where we have commingled refrigerant placed in the same container or cylinder. So therefore, we've got a mixing of products, which then creates difficulties in terms of how equipment might be able to handle that mix if it's not an advanced form of reclamation technology, for example. Then on the individual or the social level, inadequate training on the recovery, recycle, reclaim side of things, inadequate access to laboratories that will enable the quality of the gas to be determined both prior to recycling and reclamation, and then post those treatment processes, they all create technical barriers to having the outcome that we require. I want to elaborate a bit further on the quality side of things. Reclaimed gas, in particular, is contingent on having access to analysis because that determines, like I just said earlier, the composition prior to the reclamation process, and then it also governs how well that reclamation process has occurred. What we find is that lab analysis may not be readily available or accessible, so therefore the quality of the recycled or the reclaimed refrigerant is not necessarily guaranteed all the time. Saying that, recycled and reclaimed refrigerant can be reused without prior testing. However, that's not really good practice, let alone best practice, because the system's performance could be impacted and compromised as a result. Some equipment manufacturers or end users are reluctant to use reclaimed refrigerants in their systems, and that's because they've got quality concerns and they don't want to subject themselves to potential liabilities with respect to warranties and equipment guarantees. On the other hand, we have equipment manufacturers that have actually enabled and added reclaimed refrigerants in their new equipment. Quality is governed by standards or commercial arrangements. For example, AHRI 700, that's the specification for reclaiming refrigerant gas and essentially enabling it to be tested to new product specifications. From a policy perspective, we actually got a good picture of that this morning during the session with all the countries that offered their experience. And we've seen that there are a combination of mandatory and voluntary policies and programs that are currently in place. However, what we find is that we've got inconsistencies, unfortunately. And that's what makes LRM, and in particular recovery, recycling and reclamation, a little bit clunky. However, we have learnt lessons from the varying policies and programs that have been successful. And some of the lessons that we've learnt is that enforcement can be very challenging, and that's due to the large volume of end users, distributors, and independent contractors that are involved in that supply chain. A key part of LRM is also how we engage with the stakeholders in the supply chain, especially when we're trying to develop and deploy the reverse supply chain. Who are the players in that supply chain, and what role do each play in getting that refrigerant back to a recycler or a reclaimer? There are policies and programs that are voluntary in nature. Some are more compliance in nature that incentivise recovery. And then you've got corporate citizenship programs where, for example, companies sign up to targets or make pledges to become net zero, and part of their roadmap to achieving that net zero is transitioning away from high GWP refrigerants to lower GWP refrigerants, so they're proactively taking actions. And then we've got concerns around safe handling and transportation of refrigerants, in particular where we don't have access to technologies. How can we remove those barriers and obstacles that can present themselves? For example, the Basel Convention. So different countries classify refrigerants some classify them as waste or hazardous waste, others don't. So if we need to be able to export in order to access reclamation or even destruction technologies, what we find is that those transboundary movements can be quite burdensome to get to that, to access that technology. And it's not just reclamation technology. It's also being able to access laboratories. Even to move samples around can be quite hard if you don't have a lab in your country. So just to summarise a few points, recovered refrigerant can be reused as either recycled or reclaimed. Reusing refrigerants through recycling or reclamation presents a significant opportunity to prevent potential emissions. However, those benefits can be negated if recovery doesn't happen. Effective recovery for reuse requires a big change in behaviour at scale and financial incentives to stop venting these gases to atmosphere. And that can be done through a number of complementary mechanisms such as training, setting up the reverse supply chain, implementing regulation and policies, encouraging voluntary mechanisms to further financially incentivise recovery practices. So just to conclude, at the end of the day, we're in a climate emergency that's apparent and known. So we all need to work together, and that's the parties, the public sector, the private sector, companies, contractors, technicians and end users to continue to prevent these emissions, increase the level of recovery at scale so that we've got time to transition to lower global warming alternatives in an environmentally sustainable way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elvira, for this deep dive and overview on the different aspects of recovery, highlighting in particular this first part, recovery, and then recycling and reclamation. Allow me one quick follow-up question. One aspect you touched upon were reverse supply chains. So from your personal or also the task force experience, what would you say could be immediate actions to actually establish such a reverse supply chain?
Yeah, I think we need to acknowledge firstly a couple of things, and that is before we can deploy a reverse supply chain, we need to understand what the installed base is of that country. So we need to understand where is the product, how much is out there, who's got it, what's being stockpiled, what's in use. And then obviously every country is unique. So there would need to be a specific tailored approach given what the circumstances are within that location, that area. So it's very much engaging with the stakeholders and the players in that country, understanding what is currently there to supply product into the market and then leveraging off that supply chain to take it back. So it's really working with the local stakeholders to try and get that product back. And then perhaps in the absence of that, looking at, well, who else is available that could possibly come in and offer a collection network? So is there anyone in the private sector, even outside of that country, that could offer assistance and expertise to help set up that recovery effort? Obviously, funding is a big issue. All these things cost money to set up and deliver. They take time, they take planning. So it's very much a case by case, depending on the situation of that specific country.
Thank you. And let me also introduce Laurent. Thank you also for being an expert on the panel here. That's okay, we didn't start without you. So Laurent was also member of the task force and is working for Klima Life, also with experience more than 30 years. Now as responsible for circular economy and the public affairs manager. And he is in particular also focusing on good practice by training, capacity development on different levels for technicians, but then also for managers of the private sector and public authorities. So all this ideally goes hand in hand. In addition, Laurent also is president of ADC3R, which is the French Association of Distributors, Fillers, Recovery and Reclamation. And he also has some other functions. So to break the ice, first question also comes from me to you, Laurent, which is actually which partnerships, both domestic and international, would you say could be formed to actually build the technical capacity and also to secure investment required to establish reclamation facilities or regional centers for refrigerant, either reclamation or maybe also destruction? If you can enlighten us a bit.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Elvira. As I said this morning, I would like to stop urban legend about the reclamation of blends. So all the recovery refrigerant can be recycling or reclaimed. It depends on the selective collection and the good practice. But for blends, for flammable, for non-flammable, etc., all the recovery refrigerant can be recycling or reclaimed, but the good practice and the selective connection is the key. About the low capacity country, the key is also the mutualization of the different process and the different access of the equipment. It could be mutualization of the private sector. If you have, example, a license for putting on the market of the virgin product, your importer or your distributor could make a mutualization of their practice to give the access to the equipment, but it could be also on the different country level to have a mutualization. For example, if two countries with a low capacity could have only one equipment to mutualize all the capacity of the recovery market. And the key of this is to increase the recovery. And to increase the recovery, it's my opinion. It's only my opinion. But to stop the disposable, it's part of the key to increase the recovery, because the job to return the cylinders to the distributor, to the importer, is the same job that to return the waste of refrigerant. So if you stop the disposable, don't forget that on each disposable goes to the WCCE, is the best way, but you have a minimum 5 to 8% of the refrigerant inside. So if you stop the disposable, you give the start of the good practice to return the different product.
Thank you, Laurent. And now I would like to open up to the audience and invite for either questions, comments, for your contributions, for your experiences on the topic of recovery, recycling, and reclamation. Yes, please. And I will collect a few questions. We will answer them and then do a second round. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I have one question. Does the quality of the refrigerant influence the recovery? Is there a level of purity to carry out the reclamation recovery? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those two questions. Yes, please.
Thank you and good afternoon to all. My question is basically regarding the challenges associated for the SMEs in large countries where the service technicians mostly operate in an informal sector. How does they lack capacity, though of course efforts are being made to include in the training curriculum these aspects, but still there are huge gaps. How do you think that these gaps could be addressed in terms of especially the capacity building of alternative technologies for the technicians? Thank you.
Thank you. I can take one more if you want. Somebody wants? Yes, please.
Thank you and good afternoon. My question regards the Basel Convention. To your opinion, do the current rules are a problem, or the way importing or exporting countries apply them, interpret them, are the problem? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So we'll give it the first shot for the answers. And of course, I'll ask Elvira and Laurent to answer, but if anybody in the audience would like to contribute, please also feel welcome to raise your hand. So we had quality of refrigerants, what's the influence on reclamation, level of purity, does it affect recovery, challenges, especially for informal technicians, how could that be covered? And then last one was on Basel Convention, rules or application, where's the challenge?
Great questions, thank you. So the question around quality and the purity. So if we take AHRI 700 standard, the purity specification is 99.6%. So if you've obviously got a refrigerant with multiple components, the ratio of those components will have a range of purity for the respective components. So it really depends on the refrigerant that we're talking about. But saying that, there are specifications and there are purity levels. Ideally, when there is recovery happening, you want to avoid mixing refrigerants in the same container. But the reality is, a lot of the time, the technicians don't have a bank of cylinders that they can pick and choose and differentiate the product. So a lot of the time, the refrigerant does get mixed, which then could impact the overall purity or the composition of that mix. So then when it's time to do reclamation, you would need access to a sophisticated or a more advanced reclamation technology that has got the capacity to do distillation, that can separate the components, and then at times we can also blend in some virgin product to bring the specifications, or the purity I should say, of the compositions back to the right ratios. That's in an ideal situation. But if the technician doesn't have access to a number of cylinders that they can separate the components, it's going to make the reclamation a bit tricky if the reclaim technology doesn't have the capacity to deal with the multiple components. On the question around the informal sector, I think if there was higher value placed on reclaimed gas, and now this is my personal view, if there was higher financial value placed on reclaimed gas, the technician will be more incentivized to recover that gas. When the price of new product or virgin product is low and there's plenty of it around, it's plentiful, there's really no incentive to recover the gas, to recycle it or reclaim it. So we need to shift how that value is placed. And I think one way of doing that is by mandating a portion of reclaimed product going back into the supply chain through a form of regulation, for example. So therefore that drives a deliberate change in behaviour and offers a higher value for that recovered product in order for it to be reclaimed and then resupplied. And then with respect to the query around the Basel Convention, sorry, I only heard half of your comment, but you're right, interpretation is a big factor, and then how certain countries have actually legislated that interpretation is the other factor that unfortunately can create hindrances to movement. Thank you.
Nothing really to add because you say everything, Elvira. But it's true that the quality of the recovery product it's a big impact for reuse it. That's why I speak about the good practice at the beginning, because if there is a selective collection with a good practice, you have less risk that the product is not recycled or reclaimed. If you know the life of equipment, also, it's you reduce the risk of the mixture. Because the issue for the recycling and the reclaim regarding the safety of the equipment and the technician, and regarding the energy consumption and the efficiency of the equipment, it's impurity inside the recovery product. If you have another refrigerant mixed with the original refrigerant, it's not possible to recycle or reclaim the product. That's why training and selective collection is very important. For R32, for example, it's very easy because it's monomolecular refrigerant. So it's not necessary to, you can recover it easier. For the blends of HFCs, you have to follow the good practice and to recover in liquids in the system to secure the good composition of the product. But all the product could be reclaimed if you follow the good practice. About informal sectors, it's also important to see or create an existing second market. In each country, you recover the copper, so you can recover also the refrigerant. But if the virgin product the price of the virgin product is too low, there is no existing second market because the price of the recycling or reclaimed product is too higher. So you have to see this topic about the existing of the second market, because the price is also an issue for the reclamation and the recycling product. And for the Basel Convention, it's true that sometimes it's an issue because you need a long time to submit the folder. There is sometimes no answer from the port or the different actors to have the answer, because the recovery product has a waste statute, hazardous waste statute, so it's very difficult. And sometimes if the country have not the capacity to have his own equipment for recycling, reclaim, or destroy the product, we have to use the Basel Convention system, and we need long time. And if we say long time, we say money.
Yes, before I take the questions, I would also like to make one more addition to the capacity development efforts and the informal sector. I think in addition to government-supported capacity development programs, to highlight this aspect of partnerships, really it is also to involve private sector, so either equipment manufacturers, importers, or also refrigerant producers, within the scope of extended producer responsibility, to also take on those capacity development efforts. They do that already, obviously, because they want their equipment to be properly installed and even maintained. And then to include also this aspect of recovery and proper treatment at end of life, I think that should be a joint effort, really. And then I go for the second round of questions. Yes, you would like to answer directly, and then I'll take you and back there.
Thank you. This time I would like to ask the question directly to you as a facilitator and one of the implementing agencies also. GIZ has been quite extensively working in the area of servicing sector in many countries. So what challenges do you see? Why this has, right from the CFC phase out days, efforts we have been talking about RRR. Why do you think this has not really come up? What do you see in the ground level challenges as an implementing agency? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank both experts for sharing the experience. My question is, are there any specific challenges encountered with the blended gases in the reclamation stage? Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Catherine Witherspoon, from the ClimateWorks Foundation, and a former regulator in California where we did do LRM requirements for automotive refrigerants. When I listen to all of this, is more of a comment than a question. It seems to be an overwhelming challenge, and the amount of time and effort and expense to do LRM right throughout the developing world is extraordinary. And I think before the Montreal Protocol goes too far down this path, the TEEP should analyze the comparative costs of an accelerated HFC phase down against a full-blown LRM effort. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do LRM at all, but it can be done in high-value applications like preventing leaks in supermarkets, you know, or sort of capturing big venting from refrigerators, chillers, et cetera, that kind of thing, as opposed to this massive infrastructure with laboratories, you know, and technician certification and enforcement regimes and blah, 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 and colliding conventions. If we turn off the tap, we don't have to do any of it. So why are we having this conversation? I guess, and it wasn't your intent, but every document you read just makes your heart heavier. So I think we need to be a lot more practical about reality and limited resources and high value LRM interventions to do now, and as fast as we can phase out HFCs.
Thank you for that comment. We'll also take responses to that. I will start with the first question that was posed to me regarding challenges of RRR and our experience as GIZ. I think, unfortunately, it's only recently that there is really a momentum that we as an implementing agency have seen happening, that really there's more focus on it, that awareness is being increased. Yes, there have been efforts by different players, but really it hasn't been in the main attention of the Montreal Protocol, neither of any other international agreements. So therefore, efforts have really, as you know, of course, been put into looking into the whole production and use aspects and neglecting a bit, unfortunately, what happens at the end of use. For GIZ support in the skills sector, in the servicing sector, as you know, and maybe this is also partly an answer to the last contribution, what we are focusing on is a lot of trying to avoid the build-up of any banks. So really promoting going for natural refrigerants where then you don't have to deal with these very delicate recycling and reclamation procedures. But reality also is that we have a lot existing. So what we don't want, I think there I speak probably for all of us, is that it is being vented. So we do need to cover it. Yes, it is expensive, and I hope the challenges we outline here don't discourage anyone, but actually encourage to take the first steps and jointly also to benefit from the solutions that are already here, from successful experiences in different countries, in different regions, and take it step by step. And every single step I'm really convinced that we take is a plus for us. So even if we cannot cover it all, let's still go for it. For the other questions, I'll be happy to hand over to Elvira and Laura.
Thank you. Sorry, the question around direct emission strategy, specific gases. Can I just have clarification on that question, please? Yeah, thank you, yeah.
My question is there any specific challenges have been faced with the blended gases in the reclamation stage?
Oh, thank you.
Mixtures gases, yes.
Understood, thank you. It all depends on how sophisticated your reclamation equipment is. So if you've got latest sort of, let's call it state-of-the-art, best practice equipment that's been designed specifically for multiple component refrigerants, different boiling points, all that chemistry that sits behind that, And then you've got good operators, trained technicians that know how to operate the equipment, pull off the gases in order to get the reclaimed product. It makes it easier. But if you don't have access to that sophisticated technology, you will have challenges, because we know that these blends, you have refrigerant glide, you have the behaviour of the refrigerants change due to their composition, the chemistry. So it really depends on the equipment that you have and how well engineered it is to deal with the various blends and components that you will be facing. And then just to make a comment to the Canadian colleague, yeah, you're right, it is very difficult, but we still need to remain optimistic that we can do something. It's not just about, and again, this is my personal view, turning the tap off, because the installed bank is only growing, and if we don't address it, it will leak. And if we're not speedy in moving towards lower GWP, because the reality is, people can't afford just to swap over straight away. The technology may not exist in that particular location. It's very costly to transition to alternatives. So therefore, we do still have a responsibility to deal with what we have and to avoid as much of that emission now, as opposed to just relying on maybe turning the tap off. Thanks.
Thank you, Elvira. Yes, to continue about the comment about the refrigerant, the nature of the refrigerant. It's true that the direct impact of the natural refrigerants is lower than the free net gases. But the good practice are right for all the refrigerants. We speak about the free net gases to recover, to reclaim the product, to avoid the production of the refrigerant, because we need to secure the existing equipment. We need to secure some of this. But in the future, we have to recover also the natural refrigerant, because when you have a leaks on the refrigerant, you have not only the refrigerant, you have some oil, you have some impurity, you have some to impact the environment. Maybe not on the same level, maybe not for the same topic, etc. But we have to recover all the products. So today we are on the free net gases, and we have to avoid all the direct emission on it. So that's why we start to work step by step and to help, to give, to support. I don't know how to explain. To arrive to collect, recover, collect, and trade, recycling, reclaim, or destroy the refrigerant. And as I explained at the beginning, that all the refrigerant can be reclaimed, including the blends, including the zeotropic mixture, but you have to follow the good practice. I try to explain that for the zeotropic mixture, you have to collect and recover it on liquid phase to avoid the decomposition. It's very important. And there is a third question that I forgot. I think we're good. Huh?
I think we're good. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. Elvira wanted to make one addition. Thanks, Laurent.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we're not necessarily saying that we need to be implementing big reclamation facilities in every country and big laboratories in every country. That's not what the message that we're trying to convey. What we're trying to convey is that we need to continue recovery, because we know these gases are very bad, they're very high GWP and very potent. So for those low volume countries, or for those countries that don't have immediate access to recycling, reclamation, quality labs, we need to then be removing the obstacles that currently might prevent access. And we need to be relying on the private sector more, that deal with these things on a daily basis, to support these efforts. So it's very much a holistic approach.
Thank you. So we take the second round of questions. I saw Jakub.
Thank you.
Comments?
Thank you very much. It's just like a comment on what's happening now. And as you mentioned that you need an idea of what is the situation in our part of the world. I will concentrate on one topic that you are talking about, non-refillable and refillable. Today in the morning and previously, there is only one statement says that non-refillable cylinders have 10% remaining of refrigerant. Also, refillable cylinder will have it there. You cannot take it totally, but nobody mentioned that because you are thinking that this cylinder is already fixed to specific refrigerant. But it's create a problem because we create a solution to create three problems. We still have refrigerant in this cylinder, and by mislabeling it, somebody will top up and without removing the remaining of that cylinders. The second one is we lose the color coded of refrigerant, which was the highlight for technician to easy access to deal with refrigerant. We have one color now of all these cylinders and a line written there, it's recover, recycle. The third one, which is when you go to the refilling centers, sometimes you don't have the origin of that refrigerant. It's a big tank. You bring it from China and he put also the Indian refrigerant there, same. You don't. You lose the leverage of what's the quality that you are bringing. So we're having difficult to sustain what we done previously. So the easiest way for us, let's think of non-refillable cylinder with the color coded of ASHRAE, which is generated from several scientists to do these color and numbering. Why we are not thinking how to work with this cylinder, not to keep the 10% there. So nobody can have this one. If a refillable cylinders mean we have a big tanks, and these big tanks is refilled to smaller tanks, and within the regime that we have with the technicians, that they don't care that much to sensitive things, then we are creating a waste that our countries cannot deal with to be destructed because there's a mixture of 7-6 refrigerant. If you put 134A with 404, because they are 10% or 5% in the cylinder and he couldn't remove it because he don't have the advanced equipment to remove this 10 from refillable cylinders, or his tabs or his dots quality being leaked out because he thinks this is the cylinder. The second thing, that we don't have the chain of custody of these refillable cylinders. These refillable cylinders, they don't have codes, they don't have tracking systems. You don't know this going from where. It's labeled with the stickers. You can remove the stickers and put the stickers, it's done. And the second thing, which is very important for you in Europe, that it's amazing that you put it as a recycle and it's a virgin refrigerant. And you can pass it through all the borders because you cannot test and verify if it's virgin or it's refillable or recycled or reclaimed. You cannot. Even with the test that we are doing in a GC, it gives the same. It gives the same. I do it by myself in my country. It gives the same. It's a recovered, it's a virgin, it's the same what is coming there. So we have to think wisely rather than sending the message, let's go for refillable because there is 10% remaining of that refrigerant. Put a facility, small facility, and she can suck all of this refrigerant and use it as virgin refrigerant. The last comment that I have, that my worries as a developing countries from Article 5 countries, the bank of equipment that it's generated to recovery and reclaim will be out soon because this equipment is very old. So you will shift it to a new technologies or a new alternative, then we will face a problem with refrigerant that nobody wanted, and we cannot deal with it, and we don't have equipment to fill it. And then there is a financial problem will generate because we have to destroy these ones. And the destruction facility is not in our regions. It's in the region of the country who generate this refrigerant for us to bring, and now we have to deal with them. So I think we have to look to the whole picture rather than concentrating on, you have to have a reclaim. I just read an article from a lady from Statics State saying that in Europe you have 200,000 reclaim, recycle, refillable centers. Do these 200,000 solve the problem? No. You still have illegal trade in that region, whereas the laws and regulations very, very tight. So don't come to us and say, you can do it easily. It's very difficult for us, and we have to be very, very conservative what we are moving, where we are going. I just was in the equipment session, and we have a guidelines now. The country can says if it's recycled, it's a hazardous waste. So I cannot transfer it. So I will be stuck with it as a hazardous waste in my country, reporting to it under LMR. So this is why we are very cautious on approaching this one. Sorry I take a long, but really I have to put that statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Jakub. I think we will get some comments to it, and I hope it didn't come across that somebody is saying it's easy. I hope it doesn't come across that it's too difficult to start. It's something in between, yeah? And we'll probably not find a perfect solution, but some positive developments, hopefully we can encourage. But we'll get some more answers. I think there was a comment or question from Fukuya.
Thank you. Fukuya Ino of UNIDO, representative in Thailand and the region. So I totally agree what's been discussed, and we have had some projects, and I don't know if we have some companies representative here. As we know, we have a company offering coming to collect those waste if we have a certain amount at one location for free. So one of the ways for us to go forward is to make policies and then institutional capacities to support such businesses, right? One of the idea that came up in one of our projects was, can we sell this reclaimed refrigerant outside of the country? And I don't know if you had a discussion on that or point. If we can, of course, we can have voluntary labeling or something, but if we can somehow promote it globally or regionally, such exporting reclaimed refrigerants, then it could give one another incentives for businesses. So if you haven't considered it, please do. Thank you.
And I can take one more. Yes, please.
Yes, Björn Palm, representing the Royal Institute of Technology and also the International Institute of Refrigeration in Paris. First, one comment. I come from Sweden, and in all of Scandinavia, there is only one plant for reclaiming refrigerants. And this plant does not handle any mixtures, only pure refrigerants. So this shows how difficult it is in a way, even in well-developed countries. Second, I also, if you look at the number of refrigerants available on the market, they're increasing now at a rapid rate, so to say. There are more and more mixtures coming out, and this makes it much, much more difficult in the future to handle reclamation and recycling and recovery, of course. The third is, and I think most importantly, we should consider, and this is perhaps the question then, which refrigerants should we recover? Should we recover R12 if we have that somewhere? Should we recover R404A with very high global warming potentials? Or should we recover R32? I mean, there is a long range here. Somewhere we have to draw the line, what we should recover and what we should just destroy immediately as we get. I mean, the reason for collecting refrigerants is that there is something wrong with the system, right? So otherwise we don't have to take it out of the system. So this is also an opportunity to get bad refrigerants out of the recirculation. That's my question.
Thank you. So, over to our dear panelists.
Yep. I can respond to your query around reclamation for export. That actually does occur. So that's something that exists, and it's really dependent on the supply and demand situation of a specific country and whether or not they need to reduce the gap that they may have. So yes, that occurs. And then with respect to your question around what should be recovered versus, are you saying destroyed? What should be recovered for reclamation versus destruction? So I would imagine old CFCs, so old legacy CFCs that were phased out many years ago, you know, in theory, there really shouldn't be a lot of demand for those gases anymore. So destruction would be the best outcome from an environmental perspective. With respect to HFCs, HCFCs, there's still some demand for those. So again, case by case, we would want to consider, well, what's that local demand look like? How far are they from being able to transition? And then trying to fill the gap with reclaim where possible. But it needs to be assessed case by case because every country's situation is unique and the approach needs to be tailored to meet that situation.
Laurent, would you like to answer to the question of disposable or refillable cylinders? And Jakub's
Not
other comments?
specifically to the disposable, Jakub. Apologize if you have the impression that we want to give you a lesson. It's not the object today. We want to say that some solution exists, but it's true that it's difficult. You're right, we need time to do all the things. For example, in France, we need 10 years to arrive to a significant level of recovery product when we start of recovery. So we need time. It's very important to try to take the good way, and each country has their own barrier and challenges. It could be completely different, and it need to be adapted. It's my opinion about disposable and non-refillable cylinders, because I can see what's happened in different countries when they stop to import disposable cylinders. But we can discuss about it. It's open. But in my opinion, if we stop the disposable cylinders, it's the same job for the technician. But illegal product is everywhere, and it will continue. But we have not to stop our discussion, our starting recovery product and everything, because there is illegal product. And another argument for non-refillable cylinders, that if you stop the disposable and illegal product arrive on disposable, you can detect it easier. But we don't want to give you a lesson, so I apologize if you have this impress. And about the export of from Thailand, I know that it's existing already. That for HFCs, for example, I know that there is a company in Thailand that reclaims the product and re-exports the product. But the issue about reclaimed product for the exportation of reclaimed product for some country, importation of reclaimed product, it's assimilate to the virgin product. So there is no real interest to the importer to use the reclaimed product. So some countries accept to have the specific statute of the reclaimed product. Some of the consider, like Europe, for example, that if you import the reclaimed product, it's like virgin product on about the different bans or restrictions. It's but in Thailand, it's existing already. You want to add?
I just wanted to, going back to the refillable and non-refillable cylinders. So with respect to refillable cylinders, the gentleman is quite right. a heel can remain after the liquid contents have been removed. Good practice would then govern that a vacuum pump be utilised. They're not very expensive to suck out the remaining heel. And that's something that happens in a lot of situations and circumstances. It's really about investing in some vacuum recovery equipment and educating the technicians on the need to recover those heels, because if they're left behind and then they introduce a different type of refrigerant into that bottle because labelling might not be the best, you will create an unintended consequence. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So, yep, I take your point. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further burning, urgent questions or comments, I would actually like to close the session. I would like to thank in particular our two experts here on the panel, but also all of you, first for your interest, but then also for your comments and contributions. We hope that this session has given you some more insights into the topic, given some inspiration, and also we would like to repeat the encouragement to actually act and continue the good efforts to treat those banks that are out there, and at the end of the day also avoid that new banks are being developed and are built up. Important first aspect is the recovery. We have highlighted this, I think, a lot. Recovery, and then also setting up collection infrastructures and then further treatment. And it's a combination of many things. It's awareness, capacity development, technologies, policies. And if all that goes nicely hand in hand, we will all have contributed and hopefully added to less global warming and more protection of the ozone layer. I thank you. There's a break now until 4:15, and then we can all meet again in the plenary. Thanks a lot.